It is now 5 minutes after 9, according to my clock. Good morning once again, and welcome to this webinar on the investment opportunities for the insurance and pensions industry, jointly organized by the Insurance and Pensions Commission, IPEC, and the Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA. My name is Lloyd Gumbo, and I will be moderating this session. Before I proceed, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the IPEC Board Chairperson, Mr. Albert Nduna, and board members, IPEC Commissioner, Dr. Grace Muradzikwa, ZIDA Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mrs. Duduzi Leshinya, and the management team, Zimbabwe Insurance and Apex Council representatives, as well as associations and industry players on the call. Some housekeeping issues before we proceed with our meeting. Please note that all participants' microphones are muted, except for the presenters. Other participants' microphones will be enabled when you are given the floor by the moderator to speak. We also request that if you would want to say something, kindly make use of the hand icon on your gadget screens to signal your wish to speak. We also request that you start by introducing yourself when you are given the floor to speak. You introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. That's particularly when we get to the Q&A session. You're also free to type your questions or comments on the chat platform during the meeting. We will be able to then check those up when we get to the Q&A session. Also note that meeting proceedings will be recorded, and we will be uploading the presentations as well as the meeting recording on the website. Without further ado, I would like to invite IPEC Commissioner, Dr. Grace Muradzikwa, to give us her opening remarks. Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, Lloyd, and a very good morning to you all. IPEC Board Chair, Mr. Abel Joel Nduna, and all IPEC board members here present, Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA, Acting Chief Executive Officer, Madam Dudu, ZIDA management and staff who are on the call, insurance and pensions industry captains, members of the media, IPEC management and staff, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen.
Commissioner, you can proceed.
Apologies, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I was speaking to myself. So let me start. IPEC Board Chair, Mr. Albert Joel Nduna, and all IPEC board members here present. Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA, Acting Chief Executive Officer, Madam Dudu, ZIDA management and staff on the call, insurance and pensions industry captains, members of the media, IPEC management and staff, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to this very important webinar on the investment opportunities for the insurance and pensions industry in Zimbabwe. As we are all aware, this webinar has been on the cards for a long time, and so I'm really delighted that it has finally happened. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, the Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA, it's an investment agency responsible for promoting and facilitating both local and foreign investment in the country. On the other hand, the insurance and pensions industry is one of the largest local investment blocks in most countries. And as the regulator for this very strategic sector, one of our mandates is to develop the insurance and pensions industry through working with the industry to identify growth opportunities for the benefit of policyholders and fund members, and making an impact on the economy in line with the National Development Strategy 1, NDS1. And it is for these reasons that the Commission invited ZIDA to this webinar to present on the investment opportunities in the country that the industry can tap into. Government's mantra is Zimbabwe is open for business. And in response to this call, we have seen a lot of foreign investors coming into the country to invest in various sectors of our economy. ZIDA has been instrumental in attracting and facilitating investment in the country by some of these investors. And so we should be asking ourselves, why local investment? It is a fact that foreign direct investment, FDI, comes with several benefits for the receiving country. And these range from stimulating economic development, creation of employment opportunities, resource transfers, and exchange of knowledge, technology, and skills, as well as increased productivity. However, it is equally a fact that foreign investors repatriate their profits back to their home countries, where the money is used to develop those countries than where they are invested. History has also shown us that foreign investors easily exit markets after they've exhausted the resource or when they feel that the environment is no longer favorable for their operations. We have also recently seen the developments in Russia, where some foreign investors left in a huff because of political developments there. The disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the politics of vaccines has also shown how countries prioritize their own before exporting any essentials. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is important that we take these facts as key learnings to inform our own investment decisions. And from the foregoing, it's evident that being inward looking when it comes to investment is more critical than ever. Local investors reinvest their profits in the local economy. They remain loyal to their country, even when things go wrong. They also create employment opportunities for our children, for our grandchildren, and they understand the business operating environment better than foreign investors. To complement the mantra, Zimbabwe is open for business, it is key to strengthen and capacitate local investors, such as insurance companies and pension funds, who have the wherewithal to invest in some of the sectors in Zimbabwe. And in line with the President E.D. Mnangagwa's mantra, nyika inovakwa nevene vayo, local investors should be availed opportunities to invest in strategic sectors so that they can develop the economy and the country at large. Further, government through the National Development Strategy 1 has committed to a private sector-led economy, which is key to economic development. And to achieve this, there's need to expand private sector investments, including by insurance companies and pension funds. And so this webinar presents a pivotal opportunity for ZIDA to inform the insurance and pensions industry of the available investments. Already, our industry has shown its appetite to invest in the country, as evidenced by its investments in various sectors, among them the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, around energy, around housing, around infrastructure, around agriculture, health, mining, and many other sectors. And so, as I conclude just my welcoming remarks, I would like to encourage all of us to ensure that our discussions today result in tangible outcomes and impacts on policyholders and fund managers, as well as the economy in general. This should turn out to be it should not turn out to be one of the usual talk shows. These discussions should facilitate large-scale local investment in strategic sectors by the insurance and pensions industry. I therefore encourage all the participants to be fully engaged during this webinar and seek much-needed clarifications to whatever questions that we may have around investment opportunities in our own economy. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish all of us some fruitful deliberations. Thank you, Lloyd, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your welcoming remarks. I believe we all now feel welcome. We'll now proceed to the actual presentation, the meat of the webinar. And to take us through that presentation is Mrs. Duduzi Leshinya, the Acting Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency, ZIDA. Mrs. Shinya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. I'm going to see whether technology is not going to let me down today. I hope everybody can see my screen.
Confirmed, ma'am, we can see it.
I'm just changing this to the slideshow. Good morning, IPEC chairman, IPEC board members, IPEC CEO, management and staff of IPEC, insurance and pension industries, leaders, management and staff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining this webinar today. Thank you, Commissioner, for the introduction. And it's good to see that you're very passionate about driving the pensions industry to some sort of change, to some sort of definition of changing the narrative within the investment realm. So thank you for also facilitating, taking up the role to facilitate, bringing captains of industry together here so that they can hear more about the opportunities in Zimbabwe for them to diversify their investments for the benefits of policyholders. I'm very excited when we talk about local investment. So, ZIDA stands for both local investment and foreign investment. It's not about putting one over the other. And yes, when we talk about, our President, His Excellency, talking about the locals building the economy, it's very important for us to take leadership in terms of building confidence in our country. There's no one else who's going to lead in terms of investment. So if we invest and we show that there's a good investment climate in Zimbabwe, we are able to get good returns, it then gives confidence to foreigners and other potential investors that want to come through. So maybe just to put in context, when we talk about Zimbabwe as a country, Lloyd, please just confirm that you are seeing my slideshow. You can see the Zimbabwe slide.
Yes, it's on slideshow.
All right, thank you. So when we talk about Zimbabwe as a country, I want you to just put it in context that it's a very diverse country, it's a very diverse economy. It also sits in the middle of SADC, and it's also quite central, even though we are land linked, we are very central in terms of African trade. So when we start talking about, the Africa Free Trade area, the policies that are being put in place, the agreement is so vast, but it's got so many opportunities for Zimbabwe to play because of its role, because of the centrality of our country. So it's very strategic. We want to get to a point, for example, where we are not flying as Zimbabweans, we're not flying to South Africa in order to go north. We should be flying out of Harare. South Africans should be coming to Harare and flying out of Harare. So those are some of the opportunities that, we want everybody to start thinking around to say, how do I put my best foot forward in terms of, taking advantage of some of these geographical advantages that we have. In terms of climate, our climate is perfect for agriculture. There are very few months or weeks in the year where, we have freeze and cold temperatures, where crops, might wilt and freeze in the ground. So, agriculture is going to be our key. We've spoken about our role within Southern Africa and our role in Africa to say we were once the breadbasket of Southern Africa. Why can we not be the breadbasket again? Given what is happening right now in Ukraine, it's even more important for us to now start talking about feeding Zimbabwe, feeding SADC, feeding the rest of Africa. We've got so much land. We don't need to be dependent on a country the size of Ukraine, to feed the continent of Africa, or contribute. We need to contribute significantly in terms of changing the food environment in Africa. So some of these points, them better than I, but I just thought let's just put the context of Zimbabwe into everybody's minds from an investor's perspective. Looking at our GDP, we need to get more accurate numbers. I think statistics for 2021 are out, so we need to then update. But we were on an upward trajectory, and COVID basically slowed us down. But there's an opportunity for a turnaround. And now that the world is basically opening up, there's definitely advantages that we must take. The time for investing is now. When we look at GDP contribution by sector, you'll notice that in Zimbabwe, basically distribution, hotels and restaurants contribute about 20% to our GDP. Manufacturing, 11%, transportation and communication, 10%, agriculture, 8%. These are not fixed numbers in any way. If we manage to increase productivity, capacity in all of these sectors, because there are gaps in all these sectors, you can then imagine the exponential growth that we have on the actual GDP contribution to the country. Being in Zimbabwe, we're also now focusing on provincial investment. So I want to challenge you, and one of my calls to action is to say, when you are making some of the investment decisions, it's always very tempting for us to invest in Harare, invest in Bulawayo, the bigger cities within the country. But let's also look at the other provinces. There is huge potential in terms of Midlands, for example, where we are saying that their percentage contribution is 11%. If you have a big turnaround project in Midlands, whether it's manufacturing or agro-processing, that number, the multiplier is significant because you're coming off a very small base. So, the drive is to say that provincial growth is also going to lead in terms of transforming our economy. If we continue just growing Harare and Bulawayo, it's not going to be as significant as if we are looking at all the other provinces. So there is a report that has now been presented where it shows GDP by province. And that is hopefully something that we can then start tracking to say, as we are growing the investments, as we are diversifying investments provincially, what is the impact on GDP? In terms of the investment ecosystem, I just wanted to put the role of ZIDA, before you. I have to take the opportunity to market ZIDA as much as I can. And I'm glad to have this platform where it's mainly private sector players who are on the call. As ZIDA, yes, we are a government agency. And when we move around, sometimes we go to conferences. We don't want to go on our own. We believe that private sector is going to drive the transformation of our economy. And it's believed that we've got to work together. Public sector and private sector have to work together. So our role is promoting, planning, and implementing investment promotion strategies in the country. So we need to drive, we need to communicate. We've started with the communication around public sector projects, but as we understand what private sector is looking for or where there are private sector opportunities, we also then start showcasing them. We do matchmaking. So if I know of investors or I meet investors who want to come in on certain projects that are here within private sector, we then also do the facilitation and linking up, because it doesn't matter where the investor interest is coming from or where that money is going to be directed, as long as the focus is going to be on Zimbabwe or the region, because we also have to take into account that we do live in a regional ecosystem, whether we are talking about being in SADC, being in COMESA, being in the AFC, FTA. We are part of a community. So we talk about facilitating entry to the country. We are the ones who register investment. We produce investment licenses, whether you're a local investor or a foreign investor, and you are registering your own business. So the One-Stop Investment Services Center is where we are saying we register companies for investors. It will take you a shorter time to come and register if you are investing. It doesn't matter whether you're investing $50,000 or $100,000. As long as you are investing and you are willing to get an investment license, you can actually come and register your company through ZIDA. And with us at the moment, it's taking 2 days for company registration. My colleagues at the company registry office, they tell me that it will take about 6 months. Other consultants tell me that it takes a little bit longer than the 6 months. But within ZIDA, we have a representative from the company's office who literally does a lot of running around to make sure that companies are registered within the 24 hours that we talk about to our potential investors. We also have 5 special economic zones within the country, and we are the regulators for the special economic zones. At the moment, we are trying to ensure that we start a process of operationalizing those zones. There's one which is owned by IDCZ in Rua, which I think most people know, Sunway City. There's opportunity for investment there. Within the special economic zone where there are certain incentives that are given, but there are other zones within the country. And as ZIDA, we are encouraging geographical areas being designated as special economic zones as opposed to individual companies wanting to register their businesses as special economic zones. I'll talk a little bit more about public-private partnerships. Because this is another area of potential investment that people would want to look at. It does have, a different process. It's a longer process than just registering your private investment in the country, because here you are now going into a partnership, and there has to be some sort of oversight by a committee, and eventually there needs to be cabinet approval. But we are the ones who facilitate that whole process up to the final approval and implementation stage. So investor aftercare and monitoring of projects is our responsibility, where we're saying once you've licensed your business as an investor, we want to ensure that you are not experiencing any challenges, or if you are experiencing challenges, we want to then be able to assist you so that you can work on building the business. As you're building the business, we're hoping that there's job creation. We are monitoring and checking that there's job creation as well as economic growth. We're also promoting decentralization of investments, as I was saying, through the Devolution Trust. So on the public-private partnerships, these can take on 2 aspects. So the first one is there are some projects which I'm going to share with you today, potential investment projects. Those would be called solicited bids, where government has already shown that there's a project which they would want somebody to come and partner them in. But we also accept what are called unsolicited projects. And unsolicited projects are where private sector see a need for a particular business within or a particular partnership. So for example, I've got a Swiss cannabis producer, medicinal cannabis producer, and they didn't have land. So they have all the expertise. They have come in, they've invested $27 million into a project, and they had their project proposal, but they needed land from the Ministry of Lands and Agriculture. And they managed to get that land. So they've now set up, but that is what we call an unsolicited bid, where somebody is coming and saying, I want to partner with the government We then agree if it's on shareholding or it's a lease. The nature of the partnership is always very different. It's never the same. So there are different processes to follow, but partnerships are not only driven by government, because we understand that private sector may see some of the gaps and the opportunities for development in the country. So I've spoken about special economic zones, and I've spoken about the general investments where private sector are coming in to invest directly. So within the One-Stop Investment Services Center, I've mentioned that we do company registration, but all your key ministries are within ZIDA. So the Act prescribes for 11 positions that are compulsory. But if we feel that we need other representation from any of the ministries, we make sure that we facilitate. So any permits that an investor requires, we make sure that we deal with them within ZIDA. So once you have your license, if you have duty-free importation, we then link you to Ministry of Industry and Commerce, so that all documentation can then be issued out of that particular ministry, but through the ZIDA offices. So Zimbabwe, there is a lot of negativity. I'm sure you'll agree with me that more often than not, we hear of the negatives that are taking place in the country, whether we're talking about economics, we're talking about politics. We always want to focus on the negative. And we are saying that, what are the positives in Zimbabwe? Let's focus on changing the narrative. Yes, we'll work on the negatives, but what are the positives of investing in Zimbabwe? And our biggest gem for us is our people. I mean, you are all very familiar that we are all vibrant, hardworking, resilient, and we've got a very young population coming up. So the demographic dividend is quite significant for our country, and we want to then elevate our people in terms of education, healthcare, because that's our biggest asset. Good climate, I've already mentioned, we all enjoy the good climate. For tourism, we want that to be a focus. When Europe are experiencing winter, they need to also know that, Zimbabwe is here, and they can come and relax and enjoy the sun. In terms of minerals, His Excellency always says, I wish investors would ask me what minerals we do not have, because the list is endless. And these are resources that we really haven't tapped into. I think the NDS1 target of saying we realized $12 billion US dollars in terms of economic growth from mining, I think it could actually be an underestimate. There's potentially more to be untapped if we are very strategic about mining investments. So mining is quite critical in terms of our economic growth. And I've talked about the geographical centrality. We really need to take advantage of that, because if we don't, other countries are going to circumvent us. So for example, the Kazungula Bridge that was built is basically circumventing Zimbabwe being, a central crossing point from the western part of the country to the east. So we need to think about these things strategically, so that other investments don't then get ahead of us. So in terms of investment options for the industry, the insurance and pensions industry, I think the commissioner did touch on them earlier. Prescribed assets, your stock markets, your real estate, infrastructure, money market, which is not so favorable. And now we even have our Mosewatunya gold coins. So we are venturing into new territories. I'm quite passionate about prescribed assets, and in my role as a director of IPEC, I want to see more and better compliance in terms of the prescribed asset compliance. So just looking at some of the options that are available, in prescribed assets and hoping that the industry will take advantage of some of these projects. These are projects which will change the face of the economy. When we talk about economic growth, when we talk about job creation, the opportunities are quite significant. And it would be good to see, even on some of the projects I'm going to showcase, it would be good to see some sort of partnerships or syndication where, different insurers come together to invest in a particular asset and hopefully, manage the asset or have some sort of, closer purview control, and maybe perhaps get, better yields than yields that have been experienced in the past. So when we're talking about prescribed asset compliance, I've taken this from a published source. So I had to double check and recheck so that nobody gets a heart attack seeing their name on a particular list. And this is not to say that the rest of the industry is any different, but the uptake is definitely, on the low side in terms of compliance. And maybe it's about the nature of investment. I mean, when we do the interaction, I would also like to hear, from your perspectives, why we've got such a low participation in terms of prescribed assets. We're really far off the mark, but I think there's some very good projects that are out there that could get prescribed asset status. There are others that already have and have got, some significant yields. And hopefully it's an area that we can see, a change in the landscape. So in terms of provincial investment, this map is to basically show the 10 provinces, and we have then put the endowments of those 10 provinces to say what is it that we think can turn around the economic prospects of that particular province. This is a working document. We are going into the provinces and engaging the provinces, coming up with priority projects or prioritizing projects. So we do have pipeline projects. It's now about prioritizing the projects and also in discussion, understanding whether we have downplayed any of the endowments that have been listed. So for example, in Mashonaland West, we do have potential for this drilling that's now taking place for lithium. And we're saying we don't only want to be sending out lithium concentrate. At some point, we want somebody to come in and partner and we make batteries. But if we're going to be making batteries for electric vehicles, why not also be an assembly point or a manufacturer for electrical vehicles? When we start talking about regional value chains, it's not only now about Zimbabwe and investing in Zimbabwe. I'll invest in Zimbabwe to build up the battery, but perhaps I need cobalt from Zambia. I must be able to get the cobalt either from Zambia or from DRC. What else, what other components, do we have that will go into the vehicle? Where do they come from within the region? It would be good to have, a Southern African car or an African vehicle, a vehicle which is produced 100%, within the African continent. So we're now looking at your value chain development. So moving from your raw materials. So when we talk about your timber processing, we need to value add in the sense that we're sending out furniture or we're sending out, what is it called, the planks for construction. But we shouldn't be sending out raw timber. There has to be the value add. If we look at your Matabeleland North, your tourism potentials are significant. Timber processing as well would be significant in that area. We need to continue to take advantage of our thermal and our coal-based methane. Obviously, looking at how we can then counter, the carbon emissions with other, renewable projects. It's just something that we need to be cognizant of. But these are reserves that we have that we need to take advantage of. So there's a lot of construction as well, which is being talked about in Binga, also in Victoria Falls. So the opportunities are quite significant. So I'm not going to go into every province, but I understand this slideshow will be shared with all the participants. So these are areas that you can also look into. So from a personal perspective, I also want to challenge you to say, which province do you come from? What is it that you can do, or what resources can you mobilize and invest in your particular province, so that we do have that renewal and growth within the country. So this is a summary slide of investment opportunities. The main areas that we are looking at as a country for investment are the areas of agriculture, mining, infrastructure, knowledge economy, tourism, and manufacturing. And we believe that, the transformational projects that need to be taken up, and the time to get in and invest is now. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, but just to put it in context, there's some brochures that I'm going to share with you, which have got detailed projects. So you can then go into the project's brochure and look at specific areas of focus. So for example, if you are interested in agriculture, which aspect of agriculture, are you looking at? Is it livestock? Is it dairy? Is it grain production? You can then go deeper to see what the opportunities are. And the opportunities we talk about is market size. So on dairy, we've talked about, the potential market that's available for fresh milk, but then there's also the value add. So whether you're producing cheese, ice cream, and other milk-based products, the opportunity is spelled out. We also talk about the amount of land which is available for the different areas of production. So when we say there's over 32 million hectares of agricultural land, we'll then go further to say, what land is available where wheat would be the optimal crop, or where ranching is, the optimal industry to get in. So there's a lot more detail in the brochures, and then it becomes very specific. So we've done the same thing with mining, where we talk about the areas that are available, or the square meterage, the hectares that are available for particular gems, particular minerals, so that at least, as an investor, you can then pinpoint where you want to be placed. And we can start conversations with the Ministry of Mines, with you as a potential investor, to say, how do we get a mining claim in that area? And how do you get started? If it's a partnership that needs to be formed, are you looking for local partners or international partners to get, such projects off the ground? So it's really critical for us to understand where you want to invest, because, like we're saying, we're starting from a very high base. I mean, there's a lot of potential in Zimbabwe. There's a lot of potential for turnarounds. Where do you want to place yourself, or where do you feel that you want to make a difference? On the manufacturing side, as we are operationalizing the special economic zones, we will then be focusing on particular industrial value chains. So there are 10 value chains that Zimbabwe is focusing on. And for 2022, there are 4 in particular that we want to get off the ground. So the first one is cotton to clothing value chain. We grow cotton, we used to make textiles. What will it take for us to get back to manufacturing textiles? So there are going to be companies that are going to spin yarn into fabric. There will be companies that make thread for sewing the clothes. There will be companies that make the dye. There are companies that will manufacture buttons. So it's not only opportunities for large businesses, your small to medium enterprises, even your micro enterprises, all have a role to play and all have opportunities within the value chains for development. when we look at the leather value chain, it starts off with ranching, where you're saying there's a potential to increase meat production. I was actually having a discussion with the Secretary General of the AFC-FTA, and we were commenting about in certain African countries, you'll go and you are not eating meat from Africa. So, for example, in Ghana, the way that meat is butchered there, it's not very popular, Ghanaian beef. But they import from America, they import from Europe. And on the menus, you'll even see it will say, you know, it's an Aberdeen Angus from Scotland or wherever it's from. And that's supposed to be more marketable. And we're saying, why not promote, whether it's South African beef, beef from Botswana, beef from Zimbabwe? We know that within Africa, we've got some very good beef producers, and we need to market ourselves within Africa. And within Africa, we need to be looking for products, you know, within the African region. So your leather starts with the production of meat or production of dairy. And then we're saying there's the treatment of the hides. After treatment of hides, we shouldn't be sending raw hides outside the country. Even after treatment, surely we can make furniture, whether it's going to be, you know, leather seats or, you know, sofas, whatever. I mean, people are getting very creative in terms of some of the interior decor and art that you see. So it's different tiers of value addition. But we need to get to that stage where we're saying we're now exporting some sort of a value-added product, whether it's furniture or it's a seat that's going into a vehicle which is being manufactured, whether in Germany or somewhere in Africa. Steel is getting off the ground again in Zimbabwe. There is a Chinese entity, I'm sure most of you have heard about it, who are coming in to start steel production. And their first furnaces should be arriving towards the end of the year, and hopefully they'll be in production by March of next year. So they'll start with carbon steel, and hopefully within 2 years work their way to stainless steel production as well. And we are encouraging that they first manufacture steel for the Zimbabwean market, because we shouldn't be importing steel once steel production starts. And then we start export of steel within the region and hopefully internationally as well. So we want to be able to maintain high standards. I know there's a project that Ministry of Industry and Commerce are working on now to make it compulsory for companies to comply to some sort of minimum level of quality of product, because we don't want to be known in the region or in the continent as having poor quality products. So we need to meet a certain minimum standard, and there must be, you know, country set minimums. Lithium, I had spoken a little bit about lithium to say now that we have reserves that have been samples that have been tested, and we now want to get into the production of lithium concentrate, we now want to go a step further and say what value added product and all the smaller industries along the way that are required all need to then come into play. So manufacturing is going to be quite significant. We want to see capacity utilization of current industries increasing and improving, and hopefully, you know, that then you know, cascades to your economic growth and also your returns for investors. So under agriculture, in the booklet that we're sharing, sorry, there are several detailed projects, and I've just taken out a few just to give you a flavor of what you're going to see in the project's brochure. So if you've decided that you want to go into agriculture, in the dairy industry, for example, Usable is looking at, well, they've now acquired the 5,000 hectares of dairy, I'm not too sure whether they've actually found somebody to partner with them, but this is a project which is in our purview because the land is in partnership with the Ministry of Lands, and they are doing a dairy project, and that dairy project is supposed to also value add. There's an element where there's a partnership with an international entity to make products that will then be exported. But it's a $65 million project, and the prospects for economic growth, for shareholder value growth is quite exceptional. Our projects at the moment, one of the challenges we have is that not all of them have the internal rates of return already calculated. Not all of them have feasibility studies. So for example, this one, the feasibility study is in the finalization stages, and they're still finalizing the funding of the project. But this is an opportunity for partnership. So before signing off on agreements, shareholders can then, or investors can then decide to go further and have a full feasibility study done, or go ahead and calculate what the levels of internal rates of return would be on the particular investments. So grain, the GMB dryers as well, opportunity for investing in the dryers. And the other thing is, when you look at the cost of some of the investments, I'm sure with the level of funds that some of you are holding, it wouldn't be, it would be a significant investment, yes, but it wouldn't be a lot of effort to invest $3 million in a project like this if you knew that the return was a 2-year period or a 3-year payback period. So the size of investment, are different. Talking about water, I think we've got, significant water issues in various places around the country. Here, I've just picked a project in Mutare to say, there is potential for constructing a dam, estimated to cost about 39 million. But the impact as well, when you're now building a dam, is that there's potential for some sort of hydropower energy to be drawn from there. There's potential for tourism on that dam. There's potential for irrigation, around the particular area. So it's not only water consumption for a population. There's ancillary investments that can then take place. On the mining side, I've put there some gold exploration projects. Amount of investment is estimated at 3.5. Copper exploration as well in Mangura. Projects estimated at about 5 million. So these projects, if someone is interested in them, we can always go into a lot more detail in terms of how to invest in that particular area and how to get started. On the tourism side, just pulled out some projects. So Kariba Municipality, integrated resort. I think Kariba has been a sleeping giant for some time. There is a deliberate move to resuscitate what is called the Kanyemba corridor. We're moving from Victoria Falls towards Yobinga area, going towards Kariba, and coming back down towards Kanyemba. That's basically most of the distance along the Kariba Lake. There's potential for tourism. There are a few holiday homes, some beautiful holiday homes, that are already there. But there's also potential for, the luxury hotels. The hotels that are there now, may need a bit of sprucing up. They may also want to get into partnerships in terms of renovating. But these are opportunities that we see for changing the landscape of the Kariba area. Opportunities within infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important in the sense that when we talk about your transport infrastructure, for us to be the central hub, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is intact. So there are projects that we're looking at implementing for resuscitation of roads and also the railway systems within the country. Because if you want to move goods from whether it's Namibia or Botswana to Mozambique, we need to make sure that there's efficiency on the rail systems and the road systems within the country. So there's going to be a lot of infrastructure resuscitation. There's also an opportunity to invest in student accommodation. So I know there's NAST, there's Pindura University, Chinoi as well. A lot of investment in terms of accommodation. The good thing, we were talking about with somebody was to say that with student accommodation, that your rentals, you get paid on time and your default rates are very low because it's the parents who are supporting children that are at school, and you can't take a risk after paying school fees to then not pay rental and the child gets kicked out of school. So if we move on to health, there are investment opportunities within the health sector. Medicinal cannabis, we're still in the beginning. We've issued 57 licenses, of which only 11 are really active. So we are doing an audit of all the other licenses to find out whether people bought speculatively or not, because we're not going to get the level of production that we had envisaged. So the opportunity there is quite significant. So whether it's medicinal cannabis or industrial hemp, these are good alternatives. So even like now there's ropes and clothing that are being made from industrial hemp. So the opportunities are quite vast and diverse. So this is another one of the infrastructure projects, a rail project costing about 2.5 million. And this one also provides linkages to Zambia and Beira, so through Lion's Den. On the creative industry side, there are also projects, particularly for the youth. There are projects, vocational training centers that need to be built. So really depending on what the focus of a particular investor would be, there should be a project for everyone. And also in terms of quantum, the choice is really up to the investor. On the digitalization front, we are a bit behind as a country in terms of digitalization. We've now gone into the production of e-passports. It would have been great if we had done it earlier, but we are here now and we are producing e-passports. But it's important for, e-communication systems within government and, platforms for private sector as well to do better in terms of ICT capabilities. So construction of base stations would be another area of potential investment with partnership with some of the service providers, or actually manufacturing some of the infrastructure that would be required. Green power for base stations. There are a lot of solar projects that are going up. I think we're now taking advantage of all the free sunshine that we get, and renewable energy is definitely the way to go. So the other area when I was talking about infrastructure is energy. So energy infrastructure. We need to build capacity for the economic growth that we are talking about. At the same time, we still have gaps in terms of electricity supply. So, solar projects, activating some of the hydro power projects in the north between the Zambia and Zimbabwe border are going to be critical. Green hydrogen is the new buzzword in energy, and there is significant potential for Zimbabwe to contribute towards green energy through solar projects and also hydro power projects. So at the end of the presentation, you will see these hyperlinks. The hyperlinks will take you to the different investment guides, the different prospectuses, where you can see the projects in detail. Because I can't put all of them up, and it would be good to then get feedback from yourselves as well, in terms of how perhaps we could present them better, or how you feel we could market the country better. But it would be also good to see some of you then investing in some of the projects that have been showcased in the projects brochure. And then we're hoping that we can now start seeing the implementation of those projects, and then having new projects being put on the line, on the pipeline. And then we know that we're moving forward, we're moving the needle towards economic productivity. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. You know, I would like the opportunity for questions, and then at least I can respond where you need more information or clarity. But thank you very much. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya, Duduzile Shinya, the Acting Chief Executive Officer of ZIDA. Thank you for that presentation. You touched on a number of opportunities that present themselves for the insurance and pensions industry. But of particular note is the fact that you touched on a high level presentation on some of these opportunities, and you invited the industry where they have particular interest in a specific or particular investment opportunity to directly engage ZIDA for more information if they feel that the hyperlink, the information that they would have accessed through the hyperlink is not adequate. They have been invited to engage ZIDA directly. We really want to thank you for that presentation. We will now proceed to the next segment, which is the Q&A or comments. If there are any comments from the participants, this is the opportunity for them to raise these. But the first issue based on the presentation that was sent on the chat platform was a comment by Simbarashe Sukumidzwa. He says it would be great to have prescribed assets, prescribed asset status for the special economic zones. I think that's a recommendation that there is need to consider conferring prescribed asset status on investment on special economic zones. We'll now open up the floor for questions or comments from the participants. If you have a question or comment, you can indicate by raising your hand, or you can send them through the chat platform.
So Lloyd, maybe while we're waiting for questions, thank you for that comment, Simbarashe. And it is definitely a good idea. And for prescribed asset status, it's more about presenting your project and making an application and a request, you know, for it to be registered as such. So it definitely is a very good idea for the special economic zones to be given prescribed asset status. And as we're operationalizing, particularly the Victoria Falls economic zone, because I think investing in the Victoria Falls is going to be quite significant for a lot of companies. Maybe I can also just touch on, you know, Victoria Falls and the International Financial Services Center that we want to create in Victoria Falls, working together with Ministry of Finance, where we create is almost an independent financial hub within the Victoria Falls. So you already have the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, you know, invested in the Victoria Falls. And now we're saying we create an almost autonomous region within the Victoria Falls. So you now start building on the construction side. You're now going to have, you know, a few skyscrapers taller buildings than the 4 floors that, we've been building at the moment in Victoria Falls as we build a financial hub within the Victoria Falls. So that's another area of particular interest, I think, from an investment side. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya, for that response. Do we have any questions or comments? Or inquiries? Yes, Mr. Gasura, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, madam, for the presentation. Just maybe to have an appreciation from where you are sitting with your interactions with the various investors. What are you picking as the pain points that are really affecting, investment drive? And what are some of the things that we should be doing to drive investment going forward?
Thank you very much for that question. So the main pain points, and I'll be very honest with you, it's policy changes as well as the foreign currency system. On the policy changes, I must say there have been significant improvements in terms of trying to break out of the silos where one ministry will write a policy irregardless of maybe what other policies are in circulation by any other ministry. So there is more communication. I think there's more stakeholder engagement. Yes, there's still a lot of improvement that can be done, but we are now talking to each other. So you don't see as much or as many policy inconsistencies as we have seen in the past. So definitely that is a sticking point for investors. The second point is on the foreign currency issues. And there we've had to engage the Reserve Bank. We've given the Reserve Bank, opinions from investors, and also expressed the particular challenges that particular investors are facing because they're different challenges. So some, it's the retention levels that might not work for a new investor coming into a particular area. For others, it's just the exchangeability of, foreign currency with others. So it's all, different issues, but the Reserve Bank is looking into it. And we're hoping that, it's something that can be resolved sooner rather than later, but it will have an impact at some point on investors. At the moment, I think serious investors probably put country risk aside. And they're coming in strong. For example, the steel industry, the lithium team. We also have another team in beverages. There's the Indian company who have invested significantly in beverages. And they're working full steam ahead. They've got their Zimbabwean partners that they work with in terms of understanding, Zimbabwean policies and, Zimbabwean accounting in terms of, hyperinflationary accounting and things like that. And they're moving full steam ahead, with the view that this is something that will be resolved, or this is something that a hurdle that we will then get over in the near future. One of the mandates that we are also working with an interministerial committee on is the ease of doing business. So even though the World Bank has suspended the ease of doing business ranking, we are saying that there are important factors in there which we need to address. So for example, the opening of the commercial courts a few months ago, that was also in response to the ease of doing business, to say you now don't have to necessarily come physically to hear a case or be heard. You can actually now join virtually and have these communications and actually have a case without having to travel from outside the country. So it does facilitate the ease of doing business. Contracts, contract enforceability, I think, was one area. So we're looking at all the there are 9 key areas around ease of doing business, which we're focusing on, which we believe will positively impact in terms of our investment climate. And thank you, Benson.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya. Benson, are you happy?
Yes. No, thanks very much. Maybe just as a follow-up, if I may. Thanks for an array of investment opportunities. From where you are sitting, looking at our mandate, any three projects that you may off the cuff say, please look at this.
I'm so I want to be partial. And when you talk about any 3 projects, people will then ask me and say, okay, but why wasn't mine, one of them? So the projects are critical. The ones that, we've prioritized and put in our projects brochure. And the ones that I have put on the slideshow, the ones that I was actually, just going through and showcasing, those are the ones that I think would be of interest to the industry. So the first one, in terms of what was it called? Let me go back to my slide, because I think it was the GMB dryers, for example. If we assist GMB to improve their drying capacity at the silos or at the storage units, you reduce the significant losses in terms of grain. So you would have now grown the maize, and then you're actually experiencing post-harvest losses. So that's one that I think is pretty critical to get off the ground. Estimated savings in terms of what do you call it? The post-harvest losses is quite significant for the country, because we had a presentation done to say that if we stopped using, the stacking method for grain storage, and we actually went full out silos, you would actually realize about $200 million US dollars worth of losses. You would reverse 200 million worth of losses every year. So the dryer, I think, it's a start, and it contributes to, reducing part of those losses. If we go to the water side, they definitely, there's dam construction, which I think needs to take place. And also then tapping into the hydro power that we can then draw from the dams. So any project that involves energy, for me, is also quite a big win. On the tourism side, I think we need to change the face of tourism in our country. So at the moment, you have one significant hotel that can take more than 2,000 people in the whole country. We need to change that landscape. So even when we have conferences, I'm sure IPEC, they wouldn't know where to take all of you. There's only one hotel. So we need to start diversifying. We need to have options in Kariba, in Nyanga, Binga. So conference facilities, I think, are going to be another way of also attracting, foreign tourism. We need to get more people talking about Zimbabwe and coming to visit Zimbabwe on the tourism side. Thanks, Benson.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya. Talking about post-harvest losses, the World Bank estimates that about $4 billion United States dollars worth of grain is lost through post-harvest losses in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's indeed a focus area, particularly for us here in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much. I will now invite Esau and then Timothy before Mrs. Shinya comes in to respond. Esau, you can proceed. Esau, you can unmute your microphone. Maybe Timothy?
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. My name is Timothy Nerudzo. Thanks to for your presentation. What I wanted to understand from ZIDA point of view is, I think we've had quite a number of foreign investors coming in. What is the magnitude of impact on local development? How do we start seeing the impact in terms of our development? If you look at even the roads that we have been doing, I think we've been doing them on our own. So my concern is, yes, we are having these investors, but what value are they bringing? Thank you.
Thanks, Timothy, for that question. So, statistics are important, and we've engaged Zimstats to say there are certain statistics that we need as ZIDA to be able to actually measure reliably, to say what is the impact on the economy, what's the magnitude of the impact of foreign investment. So we're still trying to, to get to the bottom of how we separate certain information, also working with Reserve Bank. But what we've done at the moment, and it's a very manual, rudimentary way of looking at it, is that in our general investment, so when a foreign investor comes, they will give us an indication, one, of their potential investment, where they'll be saying, I intend to invest, for example, the beverages company, which said we intend to invest 29 million into Zimbabwe. We then give them the first year. So they have to give us their investment plan to say, this 29 million, how is it all coming? Is it coming in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? What's happening? Year 2, they have to submit their financials. So we then look at their contribution in terms of revenue that they've generated in the country, as well as the net profit level that they've generated. We look at the number of people that they've employed, and those are some of that's part of the information that we've now started collating. So end of this year, we want to run a half-year report. If we don't manage to run the half-year report by end of year, we'll be able to then say this level of investment came in during this year. Because what was happening before is, if you said I'm investing 29 million, we're just recording the 29 million, irregardless of you're bringing it in over a 10-year period or you're bringing it in over a 2-year period. So we'll now be saying, okay, for 2021 and for 2022, this is the level of investment that came in. This is the level of revenue generation, and then this is the net profit, or this is what went to the fiscus in terms of taxation. And then we start tracking. But we believe that the message is in the numbers, and we really need to start tracking those numbers. One, for accountability as well, and traceability as well of the investments and what they are doing in the country.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think those statistics will be helpful, because we see big numbers, but we don't see the output. But thanks for that, Dudu.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Thank you, Mrs. Chinya. I will invite Radmas. Radmas, you can proceed. You can unmute your microphone.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Thank you so much, IPEC, for the very informative platform. I'm from Leslie, Zimbabwe, as a trustee. I greatly appreciate the information I've got here. Data is very important. And now also to my question as a trustee, but also as an individual, because one day you're a trustee, but we have a private life. Can I come to ZIDA as an individual with a proposal for a certain sector of our economy, and present and register my issue?
So thank you very much, Radmus. Yes, it is possible for you to come and register your proposal. So there are two things. At the moment, yes, we do the matchmaking way if we know of potential investors in that particular sector. We will then link you up and you will have conversations after we've seen your business project. We are going to come up with a more formal way of doing it. And the reason why it's important is that there needs to be some level of vetting one of you when you walk into our doors to say, is your project a genuine project? Because once I put it up on my ZIDA website, we don't want a situation where somebody now invests and something goes wrong and they say, no, but ZIDA, these are people that we found, on your website. So there needs to be some minimum accreditation that we do. And then the same on the investor side, because you can have somebody who comes and says, I'm an investor, and meanwhile they're taking a chance. We've met investors who will commit money, but they are waiting for funding to come through, or they need the ZIDA license in order to go and raise money. So, some of those things happen, and we don't want you coming in and then you say, but you introduced me to an investor, but this investor doesn't have money. So we need to be able to then assess to say, the person has got some financial backing or the person does have financial capability. So we want to do it in a very formal manner, but at the moment we are, doing the partnering for anyone who's got any projects that they have.
Thank you, Mrs. Shinya.
Sorry, Lloyd, if I can also just add, we are working on a diaspora bond, and that diaspora bond is it's to allow individuals capability and capacity to invest in projects. So for example, I might only have $20, but I believe that I need to invest that $20 in the capacitation or transformation of my country. So we want to have a bond where we raise money and then use that money to implement a particular project. We will then select a project and say, this is diaspora funds. And I think once we do that particular bond, there's opportunity for us to then create different types of bonds for fundraising. So even an individual could then come in and invest in that particular way. But we just need to start with the first bond, which is the diaspora bond, which we're currently working on with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Finance, as well as the Office of the President and Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya. Maybe just as a follow-up and for you to clarify on the one that you raised during your presentation about the unsolicited ones where local investors may identify an area where they want to invest in. Please confirm whether after they've identified an opportunity, they have to come and present it to ZIDA.
Yes, that is correct. So they should come directly to ZIDA. They present it to ZIDA. We do an initial assessment of the project. We then write to the responsible ministry to say, we've met these people. This is the attached project. We believe it has value, but from your ministry's perspective or local authorities' perspective, does it have value? Then they respond to us. In most cases, what we've sent, which we thought were projects, good projects, the ministries have come back and acknowledged that they are happy to proceed. Then we now proceed in partnership. So it's now discussions where ZIDA is present, the ministry is present, and the investor, because it then becomes a joint venture, which we eventually need to make sure it gets approved at cabinet level. So we walk the journey together.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shinya. Any further questions or comments? I don't see any hand or comment on the chat platform. That will then take us to the next segment, which is the closing remarks and vote of thanks and to do the honors is Mr. Benson Gasura from the Zimbabwe Insurance and Pensions Apex Council. Mr. Gasura, maybe before you come in, I see we have a comment that came in from Timothy. You say the diaspora bond is a good idea. Please also allow locals to participate. Mrs. Chinya, any reaction to that?
I like this. It should just be a Zimbabweans bond, I think. But yes, I like the idea of just making it, just one, and we allow people to contribute, individuals to contribute. So we'll keep working on it, and I'll definitely through IPEC ask for communication to everybody on this group once that that bond is launched, to give you the opportunity to invest them. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chinya. Mr. Gasura, you can come in.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. I think it has been a very, as confirmed by my colleagues on the platform, a very informative and useful presentation, Mrs. Chinya. So thank you so much for sharing with us the work that ZIDA is doing, and also sharing with us the opportunities that are available for us as an industry to look at and consider. Indeed, the investment horizon for us is wide. I think as industry, we can't wait to go back and reflect on this presentation and certainly implement so that we can be compliant, as you have noted, the law compliance that is there in the industry. We are determined that we comply as expected, and I think some of these investment opportunities that you have presented will give us that opportunity to do so. Indeed, we share the mantra from His Excellency that and indeed, as an industry, we do have a role to play, and certainly we are looking forward to doing so. And we are sure that your office will be open for us for further engagements, for further partnerships, so that we move away from the Harare Bulawayo deals and we look at Zimbabwe holistically. And I like the provincial investment opportunities that you have shared, which I also think that will also be very important for us as an industry. So, Madam, thank you so much for the presentation and for the useful insights. Greatly appreciated. I would also want to appreciate our regulator, IPEC, for organizing this important webinar and for continuously engaging us as an industry in terms of what we need to do so that we play the role that we are supposed to play, that of propelling the economic growth of this country. So, Commissioner, thank you so much for organizing this, and we are really humbled also to have the chairperson of IPEC, Mr. Nduna, to be amongst us. It only demonstrates the seriousness that IPEC has in terms of issues that affects this industry. So we greatly appreciate that. My industry players and colleagues who joined this webinar, thank you so much for coming on board. I'm sure you found it very useful, and I'm sure we can have better engagements. And what remains for us is to reflect on this presentation and opportunities that have been presented so that we do what we are supposed to do as an industry. And finally, I would want to thank our MC, Mr. Gumbo, always serving us very well when we have these functions. So thank you so much. On that note, I say a good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gasura. Maybe before we leave, may I request that we all turn on our cameras so that we can capture the moment. Let us all turn on our cameras. One moment. Right, others are still turning them on.
Mr. Gumbo, just confirm if they've got rights to. It seems as if rights are limited to presenters.
No, they all have rights. In fact, we have the majority with the cameras on. Thank you, Mr. Mtangadura. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, and thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Shinya. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.